A simple piece of wool could make or break a Roman man's reputation. This is the story of the Toga Maker, the unseen artisan who crafted the very uniform of Roman power. By the end, you will understand how a single garment held an empire's identity in its folds. We will uncover the secret methods used to create a perfect drape and the high-stakes pressure of dressing a senator. What does it truly mean to clothe the soul of a civilization? This simple length of cloth was the ultimate badge of honor. To wear a toga was to declare to the world, I am a Roman citizen. It was a right reserved exclusively for freeborn men, a visual boundary that separated the citizen from the slave, the Roman from the foreigner. You would never see a senator farming his land in a toga, nor a soldier marching to war in one. It was the uniform of peace, of civic life, of the forum and the law courts. To be togatus, literally clothed in the toga, was to be a proper Roman gentleman, a man of affairs whose life was dedicated to the state, not to manual labor. This is the immense cultural weight that rested on the toga maker's shoulders. He was not merely a tailor, he was a guardian of identity, the artisan who physically wrapped a man in the very symbol of his place in the world. His craft directly upheld the entire visual hierarchy of Roman society. A poorly made toga was not just a fashion misstep, it was a social and political failure. So how did this artisan transform raw, earthy wool into such a potent emblem of power? The answer lies in a process that was part science, part sacred ritual. Your workshop was your entire world, a small open-fronted room facing one of Rome's bustling, noisy streets. This was a taberna, a space that was equal parts creative studio and commercial storefront. Stepping inside, the first thing a client would see were the bolts of fabric lining the walls. These were not simple materials. They were dense, expensive woolens, some the color of undyed cream, others stained deep with expensive purples and saffron yellows, the air carrying the faint, earthy scent of the wool and the pungent tang of the dyes. Your workbench stood prominently, cluttered with shears, bronze needles, spools of sturdy thread, and simple but precise measuring rods. In a corner, a small, upright loom might stand ready for repairs or for weaving specialized bands. There was no hiding your craft here. The entire process was on display, a public performance of skill. You would greet senators and wealthy equestrians right here, amid the clutter and the smell of raw materials. As you knelt to take their measurements with a knotted cord, the chaos of the city poured in through the open front. The rumble of cart wheels on cobblestones, the shouts of food vendors, the dense smell of cooking oil and humanity, all formed the constant backdrop to your precise, careful work. This was where art met commerce. A client would stand before you, and you would discuss the desired drape, the complexity of the folds, the weight of the cloth suitable for the season. Every conversation was a negotiation of status, woven not in secret, but in the vibrant, unforgiving heart of the city itself. The quality of your entire craft rested on a single, fundamental choice, the selection of the raw wool. This was not a simple purchase from a local market. Your reputation depended on sourcing the very best fleece, the kind that felt soft as a cloud and held a dye with brilliant intensity. Your search would take you to the great wool merchants of Rome, men who dealt in the most celebrated fibers from across the empire. You sought out the legendary wool from Tarentum in the south, famous for its incredible fineness, or the heavy, lustrous fleece from the flocks grazing the Po Valley in the north. These were the names that carried weight, the materials that promised a superior drape. When a merchant unrolled a bale for your inspection, your experienced hands went to work. You would feel the fibers, testing for that desired combination of softness and strength. You looked for a consistent, creamy white color, a blank canvas that would absorb dyes evenly and beautifully. Any sign of coarseness, any dirt or debris tangled within the fleece, and you would reject it outright. Your most discerning clients, the senators and magistrates, would feel the difference. A toga made from inferior wool would be itchy, heavy, and lack the elegant flow that defined a man of status. This is why you cultivated relationships with the most trustworthy merchant. A reliable supplier was as valuable as your own skill, a partner who understood that for you, quality was not a preference, it was the entire foundation of your art. But the softest, whitest wool was still a long way from the crisp, luminous fabric of a senator's toga. That transformation happened in the fulleries, places where the true and often pungent alchemy of textile production occurred. While you, the toga maker, might not do this messy work yourself, your discerning eye oversaw every step. The raw, loosely woven cloth was first submerged into large, reeking vats. These were not filled with simple water, but with a potent mixture of aged human urine and a special clay known as fuller's earth. It sounds shocking to our modern senses, but this was the essential chemical process. The ammonia in the urine acted as a powerful degreasing agent, cutting through the lanolin and dirt trapped deep within the wool fibers. The fuller's earth, a fine, absorbent clay, would then pull out any remaining impurities. Workers, known as fullones, would tread this soaking cloth with their bare feet for hours, stomping and kneading the fabric to work the cleansing agents through every single thread. It was a physically demanding and malodorous job, a world away from the refined final product. After this thorough cleansing, the fabric was rinsed repeatedly in clean water until the odors were washed away and the wool emerged not just clean, but noticeably thicker, denser, and brighter. The final touch was all about luxury. The dried cloth was then carefully brushed with the dried heads of thistle plants, called teasels. These natural combs gently teased the fibers upward, raising a soft, velvety nap on the surface of the fabric. This is what gave a high-quality toga its incredibly soft, almost plush feel against the skin, so that brilliant white, densely woven, and luxuriously soft cloth that you would later drape around a powerful client began its life in the most humble and unlikely of ways. It was a testament to the fact that Roman elegance was not born from delicacy, but from a thorough, almost brutal, process of purification and refinement. How could such a rough beginning lead to such a sophisticated result? That soft, finished cloth now lay across your workbench, a blank slate of immense potential and even greater risk. A toga was never one size fits all, and this is where your true artistry began, long before a single cut was made. The measuring cord in your hand was your most trusted tool, a simple length of knotted rope that held the entire project in its grasp. When a senator stepped into your workshop, you were not just recording numbers, you were calculating his entire presence. His height determined the overall length of the semicircular cloth, but his shoulder width dictated where the weighted edge, the sinus, would ultimately fall. A miscalculation of even a finger's breadth could be catastrophic. Too short, and the toga would look like a child's garment, pulling awkwardly and revealing the tunic underneath in a way that was considered deeply undignified. Too long, and the heavy wool would pile up around his feet, creating a bulky, clumsy silhouette that would trip him as he walked through the forum. The true challenge, however, lay in the drape. The complex arrangement of folds over the left shoulder and arm, a style known as the balteus, had to look effortless while being meticulously engineered. You had to account for the exact way the client would move his arm to speak, ensuring the fabric would fall back into its elegant cascade after a sweeping gesture, not bunch up or unravel. A poorly measured toga would lose its shape within an hour, collapsing into a messy bundle of wool that screamed of a careless artisan. In a city where your competitors were just a few doors down, a single public embarrassment for a high-status client could end your career. Your measuring cord, therefore, was not just a tool, it was the line between a masterpiece and professional ruin. With the measurements precise and the cloth spread before you, the moment of truth had arrived. The tension in the workshop was palpable, a quiet that felt louder than the street noise outside. That pristine, costly expanse of wool represented weeks of your labor and a significant portion of your capital. One misplaced cut, one shaky hand, and the entire investment would be ruined. Your shears, heavy and sharp, were not just a tool in that moment, they were an instrument of immense pressure. The shape you had to create was deceptively simple, a vast semicircle or a gentle ellipse, a single piece of cloth that could stretch over 6 meters in length and 2.5 meters across at its widest point. Think of a blanket large enough to drape over a small cart. This was the scale of the material you were about to transform. There were no pre-cut patterns, no safety nets. Your eye and your steady hand were the only guides. The cutting line had to be a flawless, continuous curve, A single jagged edge or an uneven arc would not only look crude, it would destroy the entire balance of the drape, causing the heavy wool to pull and hang incorrectly on the client's body. This was not merely a matter of aesthetics, it was pure economics. A mistake meant you had to purchase an entirely new length of that expensive, fully finished cloth out of your own pocket. For a small workshop owner, a single error could mean financial disaster, a loss from which you might never recover. Every smooth, confident slice of the shears through that dense fabric was a silent prayer to the gods of your craft, a calculated risk that separated the master toga maker from the mere amateur. But that perfectly cut cloth was nothing more than a shapeless blanket until it was draped. Your responsibility did not end at the workshop door, for you were also the teacher, the choreographer of this complex performance of cloth. The first step was always over the left shoulder, letting about 1/3 of the semicircle's length hang down the front, almost to the ground. This initial placement was crucial, the anchor point for everything that followed. Then came the intricate wrapping. The long end was passed across the back, pulled snugly under the right arm, and then brought across the chest. This created the distinctive pouch of fabric known as the sinus, which draped over the abdomen. This pouch was not just for show, it was a functional pocket, a place to rest an arm or discreetly hold a scroll during a long day in the forum. But the final act was the most dramatic. The remaining length of fabric was thrown back over the left shoulder or carefully arranged over the left arm, creating the layered baltius, the band of folds that defined a man's silhouette. This is where most clients struggled. The weight of the wool was substantial, and achieving that effortless, stately fall was anything but easy. A man trying to dress himself would often end up tangled, the fabric bunching awkwardly under his arm or slipping from his shoulder. This is why a well-draped toga was almost always a two-person job. A client would stand with his arms slightly outstretched while a trusted slave or a family member walked around him, adjusting and arranging, pulling the cloth taut here, loosening a fold there until every line was perfect. Your final service was often a live demonstration, a lesson in this daily ritual of status. You showed the client and his servant the precise hand motions, the way to flick the wrist to create that final, elegant cascade over the shoulder. A toga was not simply worn, it was performed, and you were the director of that daily performance. How did something so deliberately arranged project such an air of natural authority? Your workshop was a wardrobe for an entire life, from its hopeful beginning to its glorious peak. A Roman man did not own just one toga, he owned a collection, and you had to be the master of them all. Each type was a uniform for a specific role, a visual language you were responsible for weaving correctly. The most common, and in many ways the most important, was the toga pura, also called the toga virilis. This was the plain, off-white wool garment that marked a boy's official transition into manhood and citizenship. Dressing a young man in his first toga virilis was a profound moment, a ritual you facilitated. You were wrapping him not just in cloth, but in the full rights and responsibilities of a Roman citizen. Then there was the toga praetexta, instantly recognizable by its broad, striking purple border. This was the toga of status and protection. It was worn by elected curule magistrates while in office, a public symbol of their authority, but it was also the garment of freeborn boys, the purple border serving as a sacred marker of their innocence and privileged status, shielding them until they came of age. You had to ensure that purple dye was rich and fast, a mark of quality that befitted its symbolic weight. At the other end of the emotional spectrum was the toga pulla, woven from dark, naturally gray or black wool. This was the garment of mourning, worn during periods of loss or in times of public crisis. A client ordering a toga pulla was not looking for elegance, but for a somber, respectful display of grief. Your craft here was one of solemn understatement. And then there was the masterpiece, the toga picta. This was not merely a garment, it was a legend. Woven entirely in brilliant Tyrian purple and embroidered with intricate gold thread. It was reserved for triumphant generals celebrating a military conquest, and later for emperors themselves. You might only see a toga picta a handful of times in your career, but its creation was the pinnacle of your art. Each of these togas represented a different chapter in the Roman story. Your workshop was not just a place of business, It was a stage for the rituals of life, and you had to provide the perfect costume for every single act. How did an artisan navigate this complex map of social signals without a single misstep? A senator did not enter your workshop as a mere customer. He entered as a force of nature, his very presence shifting the air in the small room. His toga was not just a garment, it was his armor for the political battles of the forum, and you were the armorer. Your greatest challenge was never the wool or the shears, but the man standing before you. He was often a patrician born to privilege, a man whose entire life had been a performance of superiority. He expected you to understand this without being told. He would criticize the drape of a practice cloth with the same intensity he used to debate a new tax law in the Senate, his fingers pinching at a fold he deemed imperfect. His demands were specific and unwavering. The wool must be heavy enough to convey gravitas, but light enough to allow for a dramatic gesture without slipping. The sinus, that carefully arranged pouch over his chest, had to be deep enough to hold a scroll, but not so bulky as to make him look stout. Every detail was a calculated part of his public image, and your job was to translate his ego into cloth. You learned to listen more than you spoke, to nod at his critiques, and to offer solutions that made him feel as though the final, brilliant idea had been his own. This was a delicate dance of diplomacy where your technical skill had to be cloaked in unwavering deference. A single misspoken word, a hint of defiance, could see him take his business and his influential name to the Toga Maker next door. The pressure was immense, especially in the days leading up to a major event. Imagine the day before a crucial speech in the forum, or the morning of a great religious festival like the Lupercalia. Your workshop would be filled with a palpable anxiety. A magistrate servant would rush in, breathless, demanding an immediate adjustment because his master felt the Baltius was sitting a finger's width too low. There was no room for excuses. You had to drop everything, calm the nervous slave, and perform what seemed like a miracle with a few deft tucks and pulls, all while maintaining an air of complete, unflappable competence. Your success depended on making these powerful men feel even more powerful. You were not just selling them a toga, you were selling them confidence, the unshakable belief that when they stepped onto the public stage, every single eye would see a man born to lead. How could a simple artisan become such a crucial, invisible partner in the theater of Roman power? The true cost of a senator's confidence was measured not in gestures, but in hard currency. Every aspect of your craft had a price tag, and the economics of your workshop were a constant, delicate balancing act. Your most significant expense was always the raw material. That superior fleece from Tarentum or the Po Valley did not come cheap. A single high-quality length of woolen cloth, already fulled and finished, could cost you as much as a skilled laborer earned in an entire month. Then you had to pay the fullers for their messy, essential work, a fee that reflected the days of labor and the expensive materials like fuller's earth they consumed. Your workshop itself, that vital open-fronted room on a decent street, demanded a steady rent paid to a landlord who likely never dirtied his hands. If you were successful enough to employ an apprentice or a slave assistant to handle basic stitching and errands, their upkeep or wages were another drain on your purse. All of this was risk, money spent long before a single coin came in from a client. So what was the final price for this masterpiece of wool and workmanship? A finely made toga for a wealthy patron could command a sum equivalent to several months of a legionary's salary. For the most elaborate orders, like a magistrate's toga praetexta with its expensive purple dye, the price could be even higher. This sounds like immense wealth, but the numbers are deceptive. After you subtracted the cost of materials, the payments to other craftsmen, your shop rent, and taxes, your actual profit was a comfortable but modest living. You could afford a decent home, feed your family well, and perhaps even send a son to a basic school, but you would never amass the kind of fortune that bought country villas or political influence. Your social standing reflected this precise balance. You were a respected artisan and artifex whose skill was acknowledged and sought after. A senator might treat you with a certain courtesy, recognizing your expertise, but you would always be the one kneeling to take his measurements. Your entire livelihood was woven from the threads of their patronage. Your prosperity was directly tied to their continued belief that your craft was essential to their own. You lived comfortably, but you existed in a state of perpetual dependency, a master of your art who was forever serving a masterclass. Your day began not with a gentle sunrise, but with the city's first insistent noises. Before the sun had fully cleared the rooftops, you were rolling back the heavy wooden shutters of your taberna, letting the cool morning air wash into the workshop. The first task was often the most pungent. You would hand a large clay jar to your young apprentice and send him on a hurried errand to the public latrines. His mission was to collect the ammonia-rich urine required by the fullers for cleansing the wool. This was not a glamorous start, but it was a fundamental one, a direct link between the city's basic functions and the creation of high fashion. As he rushed off, you would begin your own ritual, meticulously sweeping the stone floor, arranging your shears and measuring rods on the workbench, and unrolling the bolts of fabric, their earthy scent mixing with the lingering smell of yesterday's lamp oil. The morning light was your most honest critic, revealing every flaw in the cloth, and you inspected your materials with a critical eye before your first client arrived. That first appointment was often your most important. A senator's servant might appear, escorting his master for a final fitting of a new toga pretexta. The morning hours were for precision and diplomacy. The senator would stand on a small wooden platform, his arms held out slightly as you circled him, your knotted measuring cord in hand. You checked the fall of the sinus over his chest, the tightness of the balteus across his shoulder, the way the hem just barely kissed the floor. He would offer critiques in a low, authoritative tone, and you would respond with quiet assurances, making tiny adjustments with practice pins. This was a conversation of subtle gestures, where your reputation was built on your ability to translate a powerful man's vague dissatisfaction into a specific, solvable problem with the drape. A successful morning fitting meant a satisfied patron, and more importantly, his promise of future business. By midday, the workshop was a hive of focused activity. With the client gone, the real physical work could begin. The large semicircular shape you had so carefully measured was chalked onto a pristine length of wool spread across your wide cutting table. The heavy shears felt solid and certain in your grip. Every slice through that dense fabric was a commitment, the soft snick of the blades the only sound as you concentrated on creating that perfect continuous curve. Your apprentice would be busy at a smaller table, carding raw wool for repairs or carefully stitching a torn seam on an older garment. If you had a larger staff, the room would fill with the rhythmic sounds of their work, the murmur of their low conversations competing with the growing cacophony from the street outside. The afternoon was for production, for transforming raw potential into tangible form under your watchful, demanding eye. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across your cluttered workspace, the pace shifted once more. The noisy chaos of the city started to ebb, replaced by the sounds of shop shutters closing and families settling in for the evening, but your work was not yet done. You would light a simple oil lamp, its flickering flame pushing back the darkness and painting the walls with dancing shapes. In that intimate, quiet glow, you performed the final, delicate task. This was the time for adding the nearly invisible stitches that secured a crucial fold, for inspecting the finished edge of a new toga for any stray threads, or for planning the next day's work, making a mental list of which clients to visit and which materials needed replenishing. The day that began with the humble collection of urine ended with the quiet contemplation of nearly finished elegance. Your hands, which had handled coarse fleece and wielded heavy shears, now performed acts of fine needlework, a final, thoughtful touch on the garment that would soon strut through the heart of the empire. How many of these silent, lamplit hours were woven, stitch by stitch, into the grand tapestry of Rome itself? You walked a narrow and fascinating social tightrope every single day. Your hands clothed the most powerful men in Rome, yet you would never stand as their equal. Your official status was that of a plebeian, but not the poorest kind. You belonged to the plebs media, the middle class of the common people, a world apart from the unskilled laborer hauling sacks of grain at the docks. Your prosperity was earned, not inherited, built stitch by careful stitch. This granted you a certain grudging respect, A senator would address you by name, acknowledging your mastery, but he would never invite you to recline at his dinner table. You were the artifex, the maker, a man of essential skill who was nevertheless kept at a professional distance. This was the invisible boundary you felt constantly, a social gulf as deep and uncrossable as the Tiber River. You could look across it, you could even serve those on the other side, but you could never truly join them, yet within your own world you had a voice. As a Roman citizen, you possessed the right to vote in the popular assemblies. Your single vote might seem insignificant against the blocks of the wealthy, but it was a token of your belonging, a tangible piece of identity that was yours by birthright. Your true power and security, however, came from a different source entirely, your trade guild, your collegium. This was not a union in the modern sense, but a sacred brotherhood of fellow craftsmen. The collegium was your community, your insurance policy, and your family away from home. You paid regular dues into a common fund, and this money created a vital safety net. If you fell ill and could not work, the collegium would provide a small stipend to feed your family. If a fire destroyed your workshop, your brothers in the craft would contribute to help you rebuild. And when you died, the guild ensured you would not be forgotten. They would pool their resources to pay for a proper funeral and a decent burial, a powerful comfort in a world without any other form of security. This network of mutual support was the bedrock of your existence, a world of shared struggles and quiet dignity that ran parallel to the glittering lives of your elite client. You were always aware of the delicate balance of your position. You measured the shoulders of men who decided the fate of provinces, yet you returned each evening to a modest home in a bustling plebeian neighborhood. You created the costumes of power, but you never wore them. Your legacy was not carved in marble on a public monument, but woven silently and skillfully into the very fabric of the city itself. That commission from the imperial household was the moment your entire life's work had been building towards. An imperial freedman, a man of immense influence despite his former status as a slave, would arrive at your workshop not with a request, but with a command. The air itself seemed to change as he stood there, his expression unreadable, detailing the requirements for a new toga for the emperor himself, or perhaps for a young prince. The honor was so immense it felt like a physical weight on your shoulders. This was not merely a job, it was a state affair disguised as a tailoring order. The standards were beyond perfection. The wool specified was not just from Tarentum, but from a specific, celebrated flock whose fleece was reserved for the imperial family alone. It felt like spinning cloud threads. The purple dye for the border of a toga pretexta had to be Tyrian purple, the most expensive color in the world, derived from thousands of crushed sea snails. You would receive only the exact amount needed, with a silent understanding that not a single drop could be wasted. And then there was the deadline. It was not a suggestion, it was an immutable fact tied to an upcoming triumph, a birthday celebration, or an important meeting with foreign ambassadors. The calendar itself seemed to bend around this imperial need. The pressure was absolute, a constant humming anxiety that filled your workshop day and night. Your entire existence narrowed to this single garment. Every measurement was checked and rechecked by trembling hands. Every cut was preceded by a held breath. You knew that the slightest flaw, a stitch visible from a certain angle, a drape that was a finger's breadth too short, would not simply result in a complaint. It would be seen as a mark of disrespect to the office of the emperor. A successful commission brought a payment so large it could secure your family's future for years, and the prestige of being a purveyor to the Palatine Hill would make your workshop the most sought after in Rome. But failure was unthinkable. A public failure, an emperor displeased with his public image, could mean the immediate end of your business, the confiscation of your assets, or even exile from the city. Your art, which had always been about elegance and status, was now a high-stakes gamble with your very livelihood on the line. How many sleepless nights were spent perfecting a fold, wondering if this supreme honor was also a beautifully disguised trap. Your tools were not just objects, they were extensions of your own hands, each one worn smooth by use and necessity. The heavy shears rested in your palm with a familiar, solid weight, their iron blades sharpened to a fine edge capable of slicing through the dense, fulled wool in one clean, confident motion. A single jagged cut from a dull tool could ruin an entire length of precious cloth, so you cared for these shears like a soldier cared for his sword, oiling the pivot and honing the blades each evening. Next to them lay your needles, crafted from polished bronze or sometimes bone, each one threaded with sturdy linen thread. They were not the fine, almost invisible needles of a modern seamstress. They were thicker, stronger, built to pierce through multiple layers of thick wool without bending or snapping. Your hands developed a callous memory for the exact pressure needed to push the needle through, then pull the thread taut without puckering the precious fabric. Then there were the humble, vital instruments of measurement. Your folding wooden ruler, marked with Roman digits, was for initial approximations, but the true precision came from your knotted measuring string. This simple cord, its knots placed at specific intervals representing the standard Roman foot and palm widths, was your most trusted guide. You would loop it around a client's shoulders, drape it down his back, and use it to calculate the exact sweep of the semicircular cloth. Finally, a piece of chalk or a sliver of charcoal waited to translate those measurements into a physical reality. With a steady hand, you would mark the cutting lines directly onto the pristine white wool, your eye judging the perfect, continuous curve that would become the garment's boundary. There was no room for error. A misplaced chalk mark could lead to an irreversible mistake. The quality of your entire craft and the majestic appearance of the senator you dressed depended on this intimate, physical dialogue between your skilled hands and these simple, essential tools. How much of Rome's dignified image was shaped not by grand decrees, but by the quiet, precise work of a needle and a piece of chalk? Your craft was a form of silent oratory, weaving words not with sound, but with wool. Every choice you made in your workshop was a calculated contribution to a client's nonverbal speech. The most powerful statement was the simplest, the brilliant, uncompromising whiteness of the toga itself. In a city choked with dust and grime, a spotless, luminous toga was a walking billboard of wealth and status. It screamed that its wearer did not engage in manual labor, that he could afford not only the initial costly garment, but also the frequent, expensive trips to the fullers to maintain a pristine condition. A dirty or yellowed toga was a social sin, a public admission of either poverty or a shameful lack of care for one's public role. You ensured that the wool you selected and the fullers you trusted could deliver that stark, commanding white, a visual metaphor for purity and civic virtue. But the true grammar of this silent language was in the folds. The complex arrangement of the baltius over the shoulder was not random artistry, it was a precise signal. A neatly layered, sharply defined set of folds projected an image of meticulous personal discipline and order. It told the world that this was a man who managed his affairs, and by extension, the affairs of state, with the same careful attention to detail. You learned that different clients required different dialects. A young politician on the rise would demand a perfect, almost severe drape, every fold a testament to his unwavering competence and ambition. He wanted to look like a living statue of Roman virtue, but sometimes a different request would come. A client influenced by Greek philosophy might ask for a deliberately looser arrangement, a toga that appeared slightly but artfully disheveled. This was not a sign of your failure, but a request for a different character. This calculated carelessness was meant to suggest a man so deeply engrossed in weighty thoughts that he was above mere sartorial perfection, the mark of an intellectual. You had to master both styles, knowing exactly how to tweak the drape to create the illusion of the absent-minded thinker without ever letting the garment look genuinely sloppy or disrespectful. You were not just a maker of clothes, you were a sculptor of reputation, using fabric to chisel out an image of gravitas, intellect, or authority long before your client ever opened his mouth to speak in the forum. How much of Roman politics was decided by the unspoken arguments made by a master toga maker's hands? Yet even the most perfect drape could not withstand the slow, relentless tide of history. By the 3rd century of the Common Era, the world that had once revolved around the toga was beginning to fracture. The empire was changing, and its clothing had to change with it. The sheer impracticality of your life's work was becoming impossible to ignore. The toga was a garment for a stable, civilian-centered life. For long days of debate in the forum, and leisurely strolls through the city. But Rome was now a sprawling, militarized state, constantly fighting battles on distant frontiers. Emperors spent more time in military camps than in the Senate House, and the men who held real power were soldiers, not orators. In this new world, the cumbersome 6-meter wrap was a ridiculous hindrance. You began to see high-ranking officials, even the emperor himself, preferring the simple, practical pallium, a rectangular Greek cloak that was far easier to put on and move in. It was a quiet but devastating signal. The ultimate symbol of Roman identity was being cast aside as an inconvenient relic. For you, the toga maker, this cultural shift was not an abstract idea, it was a direct threat to your livelihood. The demand for your masterpiece began to dwindle, season by season, like a slow leak in a wineskin. The prestigious commissions from the Palatine Hill grew fewer and farther between, replaced by requests for simpler, faster work. The economic pressure was immediate and brutal. Your workshop, once bustling with apprentices, grew quieter. You found yourself spending more time on repairs and alterations than on creating glorious new garments. The great bolts of expensive Tarentine wool gathered dust in the corner, a costly investment you could no longer justify. You were faced with a stark choice: adapt or fade into irrelevance. Some of your colleagues, proud masters of the old ways, stubbornly refused to change. They watched as their client list shrank and their savings evaporated, their once respected skills now seen as archaic. But you had a family to feed, a workshop to maintain. You had to make a difficult pivot. You began to accept orders for those very palliums, for sturdy military-style tunics, and even for the barbarian-inspired trousers that were becoming common among soldiers and bureaucrats. It was humbling work. Your hands, trained to create the elegant, complex folds of the Baltius, were now stitching simple, straight seams. The art was gone, replaced by mere utility. You were no longer a guardian of Roman identity. You were just a tailor. This decline of your craft mirrored the transformation of the empire itself. The rigid visual hierarchy that your togas had so clearly defined was blurring, replaced by a new, more practical, and far less elegant world. The civilization you had spent your life clothing was slowly undressing itself, leaving you and your sacred art behind. What does it mean when the soul of a civilization no longer wishes to wear its own skin? The secrets of your workshop died with the last toga maker. We have the words of poets, the stern faces of marble statues, and the meticulous accounts of historians, but we have almost nothing of the craft itself. No complete, pristine toga has survived the damp and the decay of 2,000 years. No detailed manual, written by a master, explains the precise geometry of the drape or the exact tension for a perfect Baltius. The physical truth of your daily work is a ghost, leaving modern experts with a series of profound and tantalizing mysteries. Consider the most basic yet most elusive element, that brilliant, commanding white. Roman writers boasted of togas so luminous they could blind you in the sun. We know they used urine and fuller's earth, but modern recreations consistently fall short of that legendary brightness. Was there a secret ingredient, a specific type of clay from a particular quarry, that reacted with the wool's lanolin in a unique way? Perhaps the fullers possessed a lost multi-stage process, a specific sequence of soaking, treading, and rinsing that we have not yet pieced together from the fragmented clues. Without a single perfectly preserved sample, we can only guess at the exact chemical alchemy that produced a white toga that was not just clean, but visually stunning. Then there is the cloth itself. The finest Roman wool from places like Tarentum was described as being impossibly soft, yet remarkably durable. How do their spinners and weavers achieve such a dense, luxurious weave without modern machinery? The precise thread count, the specific type of loom, the technique for creating a fabric that was both heavy enough for a stately drape and light enough to move with the body. These are puzzles that textile specialists are still trying to reverse engineer. They study microscopic fragments of cloth from archaeological sites, looking for clues in the twist of a single thread. They attempt to replicate the weave on reconstructed looms, but the result never quite matches the descriptions of that cloud-like yet substantial wool worn by the elite. The greatest mystery, however, is the drape itself. We can cut a semicircle of cloth based on the dimensions from statues. but making it hang correctly on a living, breathing person is another matter entirely. The written accounts tell us what a toga looked like, but not how to make it stay that way through a long day of speeches and gestures. Were there hidden stitches, tiny internal tacks placed at strategic point of tension that held the complex folds in place? Did toga makers use a secret method of pre-shaping the wool, almost like a modern tailor steams a garment, to train the fabric to fall in a specific way? We can create a reasonable imitation, but we cannot replicate the effortless, self-reforming grace that your hands could engineer. The true mastery of your craft remains just out of reach, a silent testament to an art form whose deepest secrets were never written down, only passed from your skilled hands to the wool and then lost to time. What other profound knowledge has simply vanished, leaving us with only the echo of its perfection? The rhythmic snip of your shears was a sound your children fell asleep to, a lullaby woven from the sounds of your trade. Your family did not live separate from your work. They were immersed in it, their lives stitched into the very fabric of your craft. Your wife was your most trusted partner, the unseen manager of your entire enterprise. While you focused on the client-facing artistry of measuring and draping, she handled the complex mathematics of the accounts, calculating the cost of wool, the fees for the fullers, and the final price for a toga, ensuring your family did not just create beauty, but also earned a living from it. In the quiet hours after the shop shutters were closed, she would sit with her wax tablets, her stylus moving steadily by the light of a single oil lamp, her work ensuring your prosperity was as solid and well-constructed as your finest garment. Your children, too, grew up amidst the bolts of cloth. From a young age, they learned the trade by performing simple, essential tasks. Your son might be given a pair of carding combs, his small hands learning to tease apart the raw wool, preparing it for spinning. Your daughter might be entrusted with sorting the spools of thread by thickness and color, or with using a polished stone to smooth the surface of a nearly finished toga, giving it that final, soft sheen. This was not child labor in the grim sense. It was an apprenticeship in dignity. You were teaching them the family trade, passing on the skills that ensured their future security and the continuation of your name. Your success as an artisan meant your son might not only inherit your workshop, but also the education to read contracts and correspond with suppliers. The money you earned could pay for a literarius, a teacher, to give him the basic literacy and numeracy that would elevate him from a mere craftsman to a true businessman. Your family's well-being, the food on your table, the solid roof over your heads, and the hope for your children's future, all of it hung by a thread, the same strong, continuous thread you used to sew the hem of a senator's toga. You worked not for fame, but for the simple, profound goal of providing a legacy. In a world of unpredictable fortunes, your craft was the steady loom on which your family's security was woven. How many of Rome's great monuments were built on the quiet, domestic ambitions of fathers and mothers working by lamplight? Your workshop was not an island, but one vessel in a crowded fleet, all sailing the same competitive waters. Just down the street, another toga maker's open taberna displayed his own bolts of fabric, a constant, silent challenge. Your rival Gaius was a mere 30 paces away, and you knew his work almost as well as your own. You could recognize the slightly tighter weave of his cloth, and the distinctive, perhaps overly flashy, way he arranged the baltius on his clients. This proximity created an unspoken pressure that shaped your every decision. You could not afford to be merely good, you had to be demonstrably better. A senator's servant, sent to collect a finished toga, would pass both workshops on his walk. If your drape was less crisp, your wool less luminous, the comparison would be immediate and damning. In a city without advertising, reputation was your only currency, and it was minted one satisfied client at a time. A single failure was a story too delicious not to share. Picture the horror if a client's toga, strained during a passionate gesture in the forum, tore along a poorly finished seam. The laughter would ripple through the crowd, but the real damage would be to your name. The story of the ripped toga would be told and retold in every wealthy home, forever marking you as the careless artisan whose work literally fell apart under pressure. That one incident could empty your workshop for good, leaving you with nothing but expensive wool and a ruined legacy. but the opposite was also true, offering a glimmer of life-changing potential. If a celebrated orator like Cicero himself delivered a powerful speech while wearing one of your togas, and the drape remained impeccably stately throughout his most dramatic movements, people would notice. Whispers would follow, who crafted that garment? Where is his workshop? A single endorsement from a man of such influence could transform your business overnight. Your modest shop would suddenly be flooded with requests from every aspiring politician in Rome, each one hoping your skill with wool might somehow lend them a fraction of that borrowed gravitas. This was the razor's edge you walked every day, where your entire future could be decided by a single public success or failure, all while your rival Gaius watched from down the street, hoping for your misstep. How much of your finest work was driven not just by pride, but by the quiet fear of the shop next door? Your most sacred commissions never arrived on a human client's shoulders. They were for the gods themselves. A priest or a wealthy devotee would enter your workshop with a quiet reverence, not to order a garment for a man, but for the cult statue of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, or perhaps for the wise Minerva. This was not a simple tailoring job. It was a religious act, a votive offering woven in wool. The entire process was imbued with a ritual purity that far surpassed the demands of your senatorial clients. You began by meticulously purifying your own hands and your tools, washing them in fresh water, ensuring no taint of the everyday world would touch this divine fabric. The wool selected was the absolute finest, whiter and softer than any you would use for a mortal, as if you were trying to capture a piece of cloud from the heavens to clothe a deity. There were no measurements to take from a cold marble shoulder, only the precise dimensions provided by the temple attendants, numbers that were treated with the secrecy of a sacred text. Every cut of the shears was a prayer, every stitch a careful act of devotion. You were not creating a garment for practical use, but for eternal veneration, a physical symbol of human piety meant to hang in perfect, unchanging folds for all time. This work connected your mundane, earthly craft directly to the divine, a profound reminder that in Rome, the gods were not distant concepts. They were present, tangible beings who required clothing, and your hands were responsible for providing it. How many other artisans could say their work literally dressed the powers that ruled the world? The demand for your craft stretched far beyond the 7 hills of Rome, across seas and mountains to the very edges of the known world. As the legions conquered, they did not just bring soldiers and laws, they brought an entire culture, and at the heart of that culture was the toga. In distant provinces like Gaul, Britain, and North Africa, a local chieftain's son educated in Roman ways, or a wealthy merchant who had made his fortune supplying the army, craved more than just citizenship papers. He wanted the ultimate visible proof of his Romanness, the sacred garment that declared his place in the civilized world, and he was willing to pay handsomely for it. This created a surprising and lucrative new market for your skills. You might never leave your workshop in the Subura district, but your togas could travel for you. An order would arrive, carried by a merchant's agent from the bustling port of Ostia. He would provide detailed measurements for a magistrate in Londinium, a growing town of timber and stone at the empire's cold northwestern edge. Your task was to envision a man you would never meet, standing in a misty British forum, and craft a garment that would make him feel as Roman as if he were strolling through the Forum of Augustus. The measurements had to be perfect, the drape flawless, because there was no chance for a final fitting. Your reputation was now being judged in 1,000 different marketplaces across the empire. For the truly ambitious toga maker, this imperial demand offered an even more radical path, the chance to become a pioneer. A few of your most daring colleagues packed their shears and measuring cords and followed the roads built by the legions. They would set up a new taberna in a place like Lugdunum in Gaul or Carthage in North Africa. There, they were not just another craftsman in a crowded field, they were a vital cultural import, the only artisan for miles who truly understood the subtle language of the Roman drape. A Gallic noble, eager to impress the Roman governor, would seek out this specialist, paying a premium for the assurance of authenticity. In his workshop, surrounded by the unfamiliar sounds of a provincial town, your colleague was not just selling clothing. He was selling transformation, wrapping a local elite in the very fabric of imperial identity, and in the process, weaving a new thread of Romanness into the frontier itself. How strange it must have been to see a toga, that quintessential symbol of the capital, worn by a man whose ancestors had fought against Rome just a generation before. These fragments of cloth, preserved by volcanic ash in Pompeii, or buried in the dry sands of an Egyptian grave, are our only direct link to your hand. While grand statues show us the ideal form of the toga, and poets describe its dazzling whiteness, it is these fragile, discolored scraps that whisper the truth of your daily reality. Archaeologists carefully lifting a piece of wool from the soil are not just finding an artifact, they are reading the resume of your craft. Under a microscope, the individual fibers tell a story. The tightness of the spin, the specific type of weave, even the faint remnants of plant-based dyes, all reveal the quality standards you were expected to meet. A loose, inconsistent thread in a fragment from a modest home in Austria speaks of a cheaper, more hastily made garment, but a piece recovered from the villa of a wealthy patrician might show an incredibly dense, even weave, a testament to your ability to source superior wool and work it to perfection. These are not just anonymous textiles, they are physical grades on your workmanship, surviving long after the names of the toga makers were forgotten. Beyond the cloth itself, the tools of your trade surface from the earth to tell their part of the story. In the ruins of a shop in Rome's port district, a simple bone needle was found, its tip still sharp, its eye waiting for a thread that will never come. It is a humble object, but it speaks volumes about the scale of your operation. This was not a factory, but a personal workshop where every stitch mattered. In the ash-hardened streets of Pompeii, a fresco from a wealthy home depicts a man being dressed in his toga by a servant. The painter captured the precise moment of adjustment, the careful arrangement of the folds, a frozen moment of the very service you provided. These scattered clues, the needles, the paintings, the mosaics, and the cloth itself, are like pieces of a vast, silent puzzle. They confirm the descriptions left by writers, but they also add a layer of gritty, tangible truth. They prove that your world was not just an idea, but a physical reality of skill, pressure, and pride, all woven into a legacy that now lies in fragments under our feet. What other secrets about your silent, essential labor are still buried, waiting for the archaeologist's trowel to uncover? You were never a soldier on the frontier or a senator in the Curia, yet your hands were essential to the theater of Roman life. The visual language of an entire civilization, the very fabric of its identity, passed through your workshop. With every precise cut and every carefully arranged fold, you gave tangible form to abstract ideals. You wrapped the freeborn boy in the toga virilis, transforming him into a citizen. You draped the triumphant general in the toga picta, turning a man into a living monument. You even clothed the silent gods in their temples, weaving piety into wool. This was a life defined by immense pressure, where a single misstep could unravel a reputation, yet it was also a life of profound, quiet pride. For centuries, the social hierarchy of Rome was not just written in law, it was worn, and you were the one who fastened the final stitch. Your legacy was not carved in stone, but woven into the daily lives of an empire, a silent testament to the artisan who helped a civilization dress the part. How many other invisible crafts held the ancient world together? Their stories now lost to the silent passage of time, so now, let the dust of the forum settle on your own shoulders. Close your eyes and breathe in the scent of your workshop, that unique mixture of lanolin from the raw fleece and the sharp tang of lye from the fuller's vats. Feel the weight of a senator's unfinished toga in your hands, its dense, finely woven wool a physical reminder of the deadline looming tomorrow. Listen to the distant echo of the city, a constant hum that is the backdrop to your concentration. This was not just a job, it was a life lived at the intersection of art and anxiety, where your skill directly shaped the image of power. For every great civilization celebrated in our history books, there were thousands of unsung artisans like you, the toga makers, the potters, the stonemasons, whose silent, meticulous labor built the visible world those leaders walked in. Their names are lost, but their legacy is woven into the very fabric of our past. We thank you for walking in these sandals today. Tell us which part of this hidden life resonated most with you. Was it the high-stakes pressure of an imperial commission, the quiet pride of the trade guild, or the simple, domestic rhythm of a family working by lamplight? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want to explore more of these forgotten lives, subscribe for our next journey into the shadows of history.